Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ornn's Kitchen. I'm your host, Graced Porcupine, and this week we'll be covering a few spicy decks. We won't be making predictions about the upcoming expansion or which cards will be getting rotated this week, as we did receive notification just a couple days ago that the expansion was delayed by 1 month. Instead, 5.3 will be a quality of life update patch for Path of Champions. So, we don't have nearly as much to do this week, and any predictions will actually be getting pushed until a month away, closer to the release of 5.4 and the expansion and update with rotation. We'll get started with our Janky decks this week. We've got Marshall, Rolly Attack, Snooey, and Legend, as well as a new creator from the APAC region, Lucky Cad. First up is Marshall. This week, he's brought us the jankiest deck I think I've seen in a really long time. He's got an Udyr Pike Lurk deck that is just so borderline ridiculous that it is an absolute shock that it works as well as it does. Featuring the Ripper's Bay, the landmark that transforms the top unit of your deck into a lurker to help trigger Lurk, this deck works purely off of whether or not you get Ripper's Bay. By taking advantage of all the Freljord effects that boost up the top units in your deck, which also ties into Lurk's plan of attacking frequently, means that overall, the units that you in the deck are just stronger. Pike getting Overwhelm or Regen also means that it's more likely to be able to survive combat, and when it kills its blocker, it's still going to be able to deal damage to the enemy Nexus. This is, overall, a fun deck to watch in action, and is also really fun to play. This is an Eternal-only deck, but it is definitely worth picking up and adding into your Eternal-only collection. Next up, we have Rolly Attack with Janacena in Eternal, which focuses on Go Hard to create a super strong controlled deck that focuses on killing the enemy Nexus with all the various burn effects in Piltover Zahn's Eternal package, as well as the Catalog of Regrets landmark from Shadow Isles that creates a fleeting copy of a random spell that was cast the previous turn. This is a fun deck that has the surprising ability to close out games and control the board. I do also recommend this deck for Eternal players if they're focusing on a more control-oriented game plan. Third, we've got our new janky deck brewer with Lucky Cad. He's brought a standard deck focusing on Bethany and Mischievous Mirai to create a deck that can one-turn kill and is a bit complicated to pirate, because similar to previous versions of the Mischievous Mirai decks, it is determined to try and get as many kegs on the battlefield in one turn to then blow them all up to kill the enemy Nexus for at least 20 damage. This deck can get really interesting, and it uses the fact that there is the Shipwreck, which deals damage. It's a slow spell that deals damage to a unit, and if it kills the unit, or doesn't kill the unit, but it creates kegs based off of how much damage was dealt. So when you target one of your own units and you have Bethany on board, it gets copied over to Bethany, doubling up the amount of kegs that are created. This then allows you to stack up kegs much faster than would previously be possible in the Mischievous Mirai deck. Overall, you do have to be very careful, because if you use the stance swap effect to deal one to everything other than a chosen unit, you will deal 20 plus damage to everything and can end up tying the game by dealing 20 damage to each Nexus. So you do have to be careful with when you decide to pull the trigger on dealing damage when you have the kegs on board. Overall, this is a really interesting deck and is probably worth playing because you can pick up some really fun wins, or even ties if you really want to. Next up, we've got two decks from the Legend 27. First up is a Shen Qin standard deck focusing on Bird Tribal alongside all the fastic tempo plays that Demacia and Ionia are known for, alongside Talent Strike to help ensure that your units have enough stats to be able to close out games. Overall, a decent deck that if you're just looking for a fun deck to play in Standard is an excellent option. Next deck from Legend is a Jin Misfortune deck that takes advantage of the Chakram Dancer to add in some healing to this mid-range deck that has plenty of burn effects to slowly whittle down the enemy Nexus without having to worry about your own Nexus health. Chakram Dancer plus Misfortune with a wide attack will heal at least 1 health and potentially up to 7 health depending on how wide you attack, and if you level up Misfortune while Chakram Dancer is on the field, you can triple that healing amount, meaning that you can easily heal upwards of 21 health in a single attack. Overall, this is a solid standard aggro deck to pick up and play. Finally, from Snooey, we've got an Eternal Legal Victor Poro King deck that is meant to utilize Prototype Porobot alongside the strong 6-mana spells from Piltover and Zon to always have a strong Poro to play, and the created Poro snacks from the Poro King help level up Victor incredibly quickly. While this deck doesn't seem as strong as the Targon variations of Poro King that are the most common, the ability to easily and repeatedly draw cards helps ensure that you always have enough cards in hand to play, and Prototype Porobot boosts up your expensive cards to help ensure that you never really lose out on tempo. Victor's level up effect also means that while he's on board, your Poro snacks from Poro King are only 1 mana instead of 2, making you that much more efficient. Overall, a great deck that has some great lines, but does need some final tweaks to make the deck that much better. Overall, this week we are going to be a bit shorter of the podcast. As I was finishing up the podcast, we did get notifications from Legends of Runeterra's official Twitter page that the upcoming patch cycle would be 5.3 would be the Path of Champions Quality of Life update patch, and 5.4 would be the expansion and rotation patch. This means that next week we'll start potentially seeing some of the previews for what changes we can expect to see in Path of Champions. We may also get some more information on what exactly will be changing. My predictions are that we'll probably see some changes to some of the relics, especially some of the new epic relics. We'll probably see some changes to some of the new items in terms of rarity or other tweaks. And we'll also see changes to the rarities of certain powers that were just released to make them to adjust them to make them more or less common based off of exactly how powerful they should be. Overall, we'll probably also see a change from the monthly rewards of the monthly challenges away from the Aurelian Soul shards to other forms of currency, whether it's the wild shards or other items that will help newcomers into Path of Champions complete their collections just a little bit faster. As a primary complaint for those people who are just now getting into Path of Champions has been that the grind out for acquiring their champions and new shards is really slow, especially before they have the opportunity to unlock the weekly challenges, especially the mid-tier difficulty challenge, which has the silver chest, the silver chest that has champion shards in it. And so we will likely see some tweaks to Stardust acquisition, Wild Shard acquisition, as well as some changes to the rewards and monthly challenges. Overall, it'll be a fairly small patch, and we'll see exactly what happens in the patch notes on that day. And we do have 2 weeks before that patch drops. Overall, I will probably be switching the podcast from every week to every 2 weeks, since overall that will allow me to cover more decks and keep the podcasts in a slightly longer form. And it means that I will be able to have a better idea of which cards from new patches that are getting released we'll be seeing play, and I'll also be able to have a little bit more information on Path of Champion updates, as well as which champions seem to be doing the strongest against the Lysandra adventure. Overall, thank you again for watching and joining me this week, and I'll see you next time on Ornn's Kitchen.